All right, so today's session is Foster Students' Engagement through Blended Learning Strategies in Your Classroom. And here's the presenter, Dana Thompson.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope you had a yummy lunch and time to either unplug or collaborate. Today's session, Foster Student Engagement through Blended Learning Strategies, is one of my passions. And I have, I'm going to put the link to the slide deck in the chat. It's also on the SCED. And all of my links and resources are in this slide deck. So feel free to open that up and follow along or bookmark it or get to it later when you go into the SCED. So my name is Dana Thompson, and I'm the Director of Education Technology at the Ventura County Office of Education. I am a long-term educator, started out actually teaching music at the middle school level, and then got my computer teaching supplemental and began teaching high school at the computers at the high school level. And then when I started my family, I was blessed to be able to get a fully online, and this was back in 2005, online gig with a charter school that was online, and it was kind of the new and upcoming thing. But I spent about 6 years in online. And then when my students were old enough, my children were old enough to go back to school, I did too. And so I've taught at the high school level, the adult school level, the online, and now I'm at the County Office of Ed doing teacher training. And in the last 3 years, I really focused on distance learning, as we all know. And with my experience in the fully online high school, it really kind of was something that I felt like that was kind of my skill set. And now that we're back in the classroom, my hope is that it won't go away, because even though the pandemic was, something we are still going through, there are some good that came out of it. And one of them is just really using the tools that we have, which now include technology and the various tools and platforms that have come up to really foster that engagement with our students. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today. And I have been doing a lot of, in the last couple of years, following of some, educators and authors that have really kind of helped me in formulating that whole blended learning concept. And so we're going to talk about, and this is one of my sons, and he asked me, why are you putting my picture on there? I said, because it's kind of funny. But we're going to talk about why blended learning. And with the pandemic, I think a lot of people are getting confused about, or they're interlacing blended learning with distance learning. And really, blended learning, as defined by Dr. Catlin Tucker, is active engagement learning online combined with active engaged learning offline. And that engagement is the key piece. And whether it's online or offline, blended learning is the combination of those two to give students more control over the time that they spend or that they access, the place, the pace, and the path of their learning. And so that's really what I'm going to focus on today. And most of my things today are going to come from Dr. Catlin Tucker, but also with Katie Novak and the UDL, and Dr. Sunny Magana with the T3 framework and edu protocols with Marlena Hebron and John Crippo. And I have a Padlet that I'm going to give you at the end with all of the links and resources. So if I fly through something, don't worry, you'll have access to it in the end. But when we're looking at traditional teaching and that whole sit and get, teacher at the front, instead of the person who knows everything giving out the information, we want to shift that thinking so that we can bring our students into the learning and give them agency over their learning and really have them take ownership of that. And so, and whether it's differentiation or personalization or all of these buzzwords that are coming out now, it's really shifting the control of that pace and place to the students and letting the educator, the teacher in the room, become that coach and that guide on the side to ensure that they're learning what they need to learn at that time and place, which is going to be different than their neighbor. So a technology-rich classroom does not mean that it's a blended learning classroom. If we're just using technology to supplement or supplant something that we've done, and we're not using technology to enrich the classroom, then that's not blended learning. That's just switching the tool out. So instead of a textbook, we're using the wide web. But are we using that pedagogically sound? And that's where blended learning comes in, and that's where following these experts online has really helped me understand what that shift needs to be and to develop the tools that I need to help teachers when I'm training. So Dr. Magana is one of them. And I've had the pleasure of working with him the last couple of years as he's done several trainings here in Ventura County through the County Office of Ed. And so he and I have been able to have several conversations. He just came out with that new book, Learning in the Zone, which I have not read yet, but it's I read the first chapter, and it's really, really powerful, and it gets you thinking. So it's a good read to have. But in working with him, he's developed this T3 framework, which he introduces in the disruptive classroom, which really means what he focuses on is that we want education, technology in education to be, right now it's either disruptive or it's distractive. And we want it to be disruptive. And what he means by that is not distractive, where it's distracting them away from the learning and they're, online looking at YouTube, but not for educational purposes and those kinds of things. We want it to be disruptive, meaning it's going to disrupt the traditional classroom education and really get students engaged in what they're learning and focus on technology so that we can reach them where they're comfortable using the tools that they are using anyways, but to use it in a way that they are engaging in their own learning and having agency over that. And so the T3 framework really helps kind of lay that out in a way that's understandable and that you can follow. But his learning in the zone is another one, and it's really that the 7 habits that you need to have to be a meta learner. And that's not just somebody who's learning for the sake of learning, getting a good grade, and then once they leave the classroom, they've, that information leaves their brain. But really, how do you become that meta learner? How do you get in the zone so that you are learning and consuming and and really taking it to heart and using that to become better and getting in that zone so that you can be able to do that. And he's a musician, and as a musician, he has this quote always follows me whenever I talk with Sunny is, good teaching, which is pedagogy, is the melody and in a song, and good technology should be the harmony. So they work together and they support each other, but that technology should not be overtaking the pedagogy so that the pedagogy goes out the window. It really should help give that melody greater impact. And that's where we want technology to be. So when we're talking about blended learning, it's not technology in the classroom. That's not blended learning. It's what the students are doing and how they are engaging with the learning, how they are working through those concepts and activities and those kinds of things. And how is the technology supporting that and making the melody they're learning have a greater impact, or the pedagogy have a greater impact. So how are we using technology to support this shift? Not just supplanting, but really extending that technology in the classroom so that we're using apps that are appropriate and provide not only the drill and practice, but how are the students taking that one step further to create their own artifacts and create their own documentation to show what they're learning. So there is a place for the drill and kill or the drill and practice, which is a more appropriate way to say it. There is a place for that because we do need to have that ability that in a fun way to memorize those statistics or memorize those vocab words or memorize, those kinds of things, but then not leave it at that and really take this to the next level where we are using technology to create visual as well as auditory, as well as the traditional method of writing and speaking to show the learning. So that's where I've really been kind of diving in deep to Dr. Catlin Tucker's research and strategies. And she, as I said earlier, has defined blended learning as the combination of this active engaged learning online, so with technology, combined with active engaged learning offline. And there needs to be that balance between the two to make that blended learning. And it provides students with more control over the time, place, pace, and path of their learning. And really, on the flip side, it gives them more control, but it gives the teacher more ability to put that control in the student's hands and allow the teacher to become that coach or that guide on the side. And they can go around and work with students individually and provide that differentiation or personalization. They can work with skill set groups. They can work with small groups. They can work, but it allows them the time, because they are the time that they used to be in front of the classroom teaching all students at the same time, using the active engaged learning online and these learning strategies, blended learning strategies, whether they're online or offline, to free up their time so that they can now become that coach in the classroom, is really where that blended learning becomes so powerful. So this book right here, I'm actually doing a book study on it this summer with people in our county, and it's really great. So if you haven't taken a look at it yet, do. But really, she has a website and a blog that all of this information is in as well. And I've put all of the links in the slide deck, so you should have access to those. But one of the things that she focuses on in her research and in all of her literature is that when students are told exactly what to do, how to do it, they're passive learners. They're passive participants in the classroom. They may not have to think critically or creatively about their learning. And by contrast, when they are challenged to make key decisions about what they do, how they do it, then they become engaged, active learners in their learning process. And that's where blended learning happens. So if they have the choice of how they're going to show you their learning, or they have the choice of what resources they're going to dive into, or they have the choice of watching the video and rewatching it and pausing it and watching it again, and they have the ability to make those choices, they are now active engaged learners. And that's how they're going to become active engaged learners in your classroom, is with this shift. And because when they have the ability to make those choices, then they have autonomy and they have more buy-in to their own learning. So it's really important. So the other thing that Dr. Catlin Tucker talks about is how when students are engaged, the more engaged students are, the more likely teachers are going to be cognitively and emotionally engaged and satisfied with their work. I think I shared the screen right so that you can hear this. So I want to play just a real short snippet from this. She was introducing herself to a conference that she was being the keynote speaker.
Engagement. So teacher engagement is composed of cognitive engagement, emotional engagement, social engagement with students, and social engagement with colleagues. And teachers only have a finite amount of time and energy. So how do we help them leverage blended learning, this mix of active engaged learning online with active engaged learning offline, to free themselves to spend their time and energy in the parts of this work that are most fulfilling and enjoyable, so that hopefully their levels of engagement increase, and actually teacher engagement and student engagement are reciprocal. So if our teachers are engaged, our students are more likely to be engaged. And when teachers are more engaged, the learning outcomes also tend to improve in classrooms for learners. So it's really important to understand the factors that can positively impact teacher engagement, and then figure out how to support our teachers in spending more time in those areas and less time in areas that, quite frankly, deplete engagement.
Yep. There we go. So, and if the bottom line is, if nothing else that you get out of this is that if your students are engaged and active and enjoying their learning, that's going to make your job maybe a little bit easier, maybe not easier, but because you're spending your time developing. It does take time on the front end to design these learning experiences that, if you just have a lesson that you stand up in front and teach to them, it doesn't take as much time to pre-plan that. So there is that front loading, but it really will provide you with the time to be that that participant with the students and engaging with them and building those relationships, which can make our job so much more rewarding and less draining. And that's kind of what she was talking about in that video. So we've all seen this: tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And that student engagement, that active involvement, that is where that will come into play. There are several other resources that I've looked at. Small Teaching Online is a great book. Yes, it talks about teaching online, but it really are concepts that would apply to any teaching environment: online, offline, hybrid, those kinds of things. And the Distance Learning Playbook, which is another one that, yes, it was focusing on distance learning because that's where we were, but it really is good teaching, good pedagogy, and how we incorporate our tools, technology being one of those tools. So I do have links to those and highly recommend that you take a look at those. So this is another book that I dove into pretty deep last year, and they have a playlist on YouTube, and this is UDL is Katie Novak, and then Blended Learning, Dr. Catlin Tucker, and they wrote this book together to talk about how UDL and blended learning can support our classrooms. And it's a phenomenal book and great examples and templates. So another one that I highly recommend you pick up if this blended learning is something that you're going to be implementing. But in this book, they state that we can't focus too much on the where students are learning. We found that out in the last 2 years, right? But whether it's actually happening. And so whether it's in person, online, or a combination even, and now, even though we are back in the classroom, which is great, we still have students that are out, as we always have, or out for extended periods of time now because of COVID or other reasons. So how do we keep our students learning even when they're not physically in our classroom? And that's where this blended learning comes in, and we can put in these strategies that will help not only our students who are there, but also our students who are coming in later, so that they're not so far behind. So we need a skill set that's flexible, and it starts with the why we are here. Why are we teaching this concept, or why are we teaching, and yes, we need to meet the standards, but we need to provide our students with options so that within the standard that we're teaching, they have an option of learning that standard in a way that's comfortable for them, because then their learning will be deeper. And so UDL and blended learning can create that inclusive environment, that more equitable environment, more innovative learning strategies that meet the needs of all our learners where they are, not where most of our learners should be. And so that is really the why behind blended learning. And the Distance Learning Playbook, they have this quote in there, and it was another one: the pandemic teaching of 2020 was really not distance learning. It was crisis teaching. And we did the best that we could do. And, we did phenomenal with what we had. And that the things that we learned in order to reach the students where they were, because we didn't have control over that, we need to bring those things that worked back into our traditional classroom. And we need to get away from the traditional classroom and adjust it so that we can use the good of the traditional classroom combined with the good of what we learned in distance learning, and so that our students can learn the best that they can moving forward. And so what does that look like? So we're going to take a look at some blended learning models, and I'm going to give you some examples. I am a Canvas lover. I've been using Canvas for about 10 years now. Started out as a teacher, moved into instructional design where I was designing courses. Teachers would give me content in my online world. They would give me content and then I would put it into Canvas. And now I'm the Canvas admin for our county instance of Canvas, and I help support and train our county districts. And so a lot of what I do, I've adapted to Canvas, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't work in Google Classroom or in Schoology or in any other LMS that you're using, or even if you don't have an LMS and you're using the Google suite of apps. It's just the strategy behind it, but I do have a lot of Canvas specific examples that you can adapt to others. But we're going to take a look at what blended learning models might look like. And so the biggest thing that I think we need to first ask ourselves is, are you planning on saying the same thing to all students? So typically this would be the direct teaching, right? The lecture or the where you are directing their learning, you're bringing your students alongside your presentation or whatever you have created. But if you are planning on saying the same thing to all students, consider making that a video. And why? Well, the videos allow the students to self-pace. So they can play the video and they missed it, so they can rewind it. Or they watched it and it kind of made sense, but they need to hear it again, so they can rewind it and rewatch it. They were absent and so they missed your direct teaching. They can watch the video and not miss a beat. They don't miss any information that you've provided your other students. So it allows your students to self-pace. It gives you time to then provide quality feedback to your students as they're watching at their own pace. You can go and coach them through, or if it looks like they're confused, you can go work with them, but you're working with that student or that small group of students where they are, rather than trying to force them to get to where you are, because that's where the majority of the class is, or the that median. So it gives you time to provide that quality feedback. And for those of you who follow John Hattie, quality feedback are one of those effects, those visible learning effects that promote student learning. So I think the bottom line is 0.4 and quality feedback is 0.6. And we want anything over 0.4. So quality feedback is one of those that will really help advance your students' learning. It lightens your workload because you're not having to teach and reteach because it's in the video format. And you can use that year after year, or if you need to update it, you already have the basic and you just re-record it the next year. It helps you understand where your students are and in their progress, because you are able to go around and help students individually in a more personalized setting. And it helps develop those relationships with your students. And teacher credibility, which kind of coincides with that teacher personal relationship that students have with you, that is another one of those visible learning effects that are 0.6 and above. So between quality feedback and teacher credibility, those two things alone will help advance the learning of all your students more effectively than previous models of teaching. So the time we invest in our design, that pre-planning, will free you to spend that class time engaging with your students and supporting their progress and learning goals. And that is from one of Catlin Tucker's blogs. So when we're talking about video, what do you want to, there are some questions that you need to ask. What is the end result? What are you trying to convey to your students? What do you want them to do? And there are things that you can do to ensure that they're actually going to watch that video. If you just stick a video in front of them and press play, they may not be paying attention. You don't know if they are. You can't ensure that they're actually watching it. But honestly, that happens when we're doing direct instruction too. So, I've been in education long enough where I'm standing in front of the classroom and I'm instructing, but I know that probably 30–40% of my students are thinking of something else. They're somewhere else. They're not necessarily listening to me. And so what I've been teaching, I'm going to have to teach again to ensure that they all heard it, right? So when we're creating our video, if that student is daydreaming and not paying attention, they have the option to go back and rewatch it. And I don't have to reteach it or stop the class to reteach it. So there are some things that you can do, though, to ensure that they stay engaged and stay, in this world instead of daydreaming. And one of them is to pair the video with questions. And the best way to do that, if you have the ability, is to use a tool like Edpuzzle or Loom, or if you're a Canvas district and you've gotten Studio, use that Studio feature in Canvas to put those questions on the playhead so that they pop up. And so the video will play and then this question will pop up, and the student, in order to continue the video, has to answer the question. And so that helps them stay engaged because they know that these questions are going to come up. Not only does it help them stay engaged, but it also helps them understand what they should be listening for and consuming. And it also will give you data on the back end, because many of these, Screencast-O-Matic, Screencastify, all of those tools that do this, PlayPosit, they all give you data on the back end. Did the students watch the whole video or did they skip over sections? If you attach questions to the timeline, did they answer those questions correctly? So it gives you data to know whether that video was effective or if you need to reteach or rethink something that you were presenting. So pair the video with questions. If you don't have those tools, that's okay. You can pair the video with guided notes, give them a concept map that they fill in as they're watching the video, or a graphic organizer, or do sketch notes. That's another really popular one now. It's not doodling because they're going to sketch concepts from the video. It's just not linear notes that you or I may have been taught to do, me, because I've been in education so long, but I was taught to take linear notes, right? But a lot of our students these now are visual. And so if they can sketch out the concepts, you know, instead of doodling, but actually have them concentrate on that, that's another way to help them in ensuring that they're going to watch the video. So you compare it with sketch notes or sketch art, and there are tons of YouTube videos out there on how to do that. I am not an artist. Give me a computer program and I can make it look great. But when I have to hand art something, forget it, right? So I wouldn't want to do a sketch art, but give me a graphic organizer or a concept map or ask me to take notes on it and I can do that. So again, you're getting the students where they are comfortable so that they are not being held up. There's no barriers on how they're learning. So you're not forcing everybody to learn the same way, which you won't get to everybody. Another way is to put, so in Canvas, you can put the video in a discussion assignment so that they watch the video and then they respond to a prompt or a couple of prompts in the discussion. And then that fosters conversation between students because in a discussion assignment, they can see each other's posts and they can reply to each other. So it becomes almost like a social media feed. And so you can do that in Padlet. If you don't have an LMS, you can do it in Google Classroom in the feed. There are different ways that you can get them to discuss in an online format. So again, if they're absent, they can come back and watch the video and still see the conversation that happened between your students so that they can interact with that learning, even though they weren't there on the day that it was presented. And then thinking routines. And so again, Project Zero, I'm going to link to this and then I'll put the link in the chat as well if you'd like this, but Project Zero has some great thinking routine strategies or a toolbox. And there's a link in the chat. And so these are ones that you can pull in depending on what you're trying to get them to you know, think about when they're watching this video. But use things that are out there so that you're not having to redo it. And then again, using an LMS like Google Classroom or Canvas, you can then put these links in the course with the video so that they understand as I'm watching this video, I'm going to click to this link and use this thinking routine. And then, you know, there's different tools out there. Here's another one. This is a Genially. And so again, I teach Canvas and I can stand up in front of everybody on a white screen and say, this is your account profile, this is a course card, this is your to-do list, this is your calendar. But if I put this Genially together, they can come in and watch this video on what the dashboard is, right? And then when they're done, they can come over here and watch this video on the student Canvas overview. And so this is kind of like a thing link, if you've heard of thing link. This is just an informational bubble with a link out to the Canvas guide that gives them more information. So I have the choice as the student, I need to know more about this courses icon. So let me come out here to the Canvas guides and read further so that I can choose to learn about that. Or let me watch this video on what the calendar is in Canvas and what are the benefits and how do I use it. But this Genially, I can embed in my LMS or put a link to it from Google Classroom, and my students can come and interact with this in their order of operations, in their choice, and I can go around and ask any or answer any questions that they may have that are not part of this and really personalize that learning for them. And yes, this is just the Canvas dashboard, but think about this on a concept that you're trying to teach in your classroom, you know, an equation that you're trying to get them to understand, or a math concept, or a writing concept, and you put together something like this that pulls in content and gives them the ability to choose what they interact with first and if they want to dive in deeper to those concepts. So tools like this are great, but again, you're using that technology as a tool. And you don't want to just, you know, have them go to Google and search for something and come up with articles that are not vetted. So you can do the vetting on the front end and give them the choice of which ones they're going to go in and dive in deeper to. And know that they're getting the information that you want them to get and not going rogue. So those are just some ways that video will help with this blended learning. And I talk about video first because the flipped classroom model, I've been in teaching long enough that I know that this was one of those first kind of strategies that came out that people are like, oh, that's cool. We could do that, where they're flipping the classroom, where they would have students go home and watch a video that would normally be a lecture and then coming into class and doing the homework. That was the original, how it is portrayed. Do the lecture at home. And again, you can watch, rewatch, and all of that, and then come in and do your homework in class because I'm the expert as the teacher and I can go around and answer your questions instead of doing a lecture to the majority of you who might be paying attention and then asking you to go home and do the homework without any support. And this would help, right? So that's the original model, and it is still a very viable model. But again, it's that if you plan to say something to all of your students in the same way, then make a video out of it. And so here's an example in Canvas, again, because I'm a Canvas person, of a discussion in Canvas where the students come in, and it's an I notice, I wonder protocol, edu protocol, where they're going to watch this video, and then they're going to find something that they notice and find something that they still wonder about. And so then they can not even have to leave Canvas to watch this video. And it's a video that somebody else has made. This is National Geographic, but it can be a video that you make, introducing a concept or a topic. And then, just a reminder, when you're online, these are your best practices. But as a student, I would then come in here and reply my I wonder, I notice, I wonder, and post my reply, and then look at all of the replies that my peers had made. And so now I'm engaging with that content because I'm going to learn as much from my peers as I am from my teacher in most cases, because they're going to look at things differently than I do. And so I have my notice and wonder, but now I'm going to go through and see what other people notice and wonder. And it's going to further that engagement and that interaction with the learning. And it's also teaching them good digital citizenship. And the teacher, after whether it's their own video or one you're pulling in that you vetted, now has the time to go around and interact and build those connections and those relationships with the students. And that's going to foster engagement even more than giving the students choice of what they're going to choose. So in this case, they're choosing, what their notice and wonder and which students they're going to reply to. So it's a little bit of choice, but it's still choice, right? And your choice can be even more than that. So that's one example of using video. And that would be if you're looking at a blended learning strategy in the flipped classroom model, that could be what they're doing at home and doing that as a video and a discussion so that they're collaborating at home, just like they might have been able to collaborate in class, but they're doing the video part at home and then they're coming into the classroom and we're doing another activity. Or this can be something that they do in a station in the classroom so that you can kind of make sure that they are watching it and on task and working with those who might need a little bit of assistance or guidance, those kinds of things. So that's one example. Here's an example of just posting in Canvas access to the two videos that I want you to watch regarding the introduction to I and imaginary numbers and imaginary roots and negative numbers. So again, absent students still get the content. Students who want to watch it a couple of times have the ability to do that. This is posted in Canvas so that I can go around and help those students who need more assistance and guide those students who might get the concepts and want to dive deeper into something else to get them on a track that will personalize their learning too. So all my students are engaged. Would this work for a morning activity? And then absolutely. How much time do we waste because we have to do those state mandated things like taking attendance and getting the students who are absent at least up to speed enough so that they could participate today and not lose another day. And while you're doing all of that, the rest of your students might be, we usually give them some sort of activity to do, but why not get them started and giving them some pre-concepts for what we're going to do today or a review of what we did yesterday. And so you're doing it as a station. So while all of you are on your first station, you as the teacher now have the time to calmly take attendance and talk to students who are coming in late or being pulled out. And so you want to make sure that you understand, how long are you being pulled out for? When are you coming back? What do I not? All of those things that we have to do in in addition to teaching. So let's make that easier on ourselves and use these blended learning strategies and these tools that we now have, especially now that most districts are one-to-one after the pandemic. They now have those tools that you can do in the classroom. We still have the issue of connectivity at home. So some of these things you might not want to do at home because not all your students have the ability to do these things at home or the time, because they're going home and taking care of their little brothers and sisters while their parents are still working. And so they might not have the time to do some of this stuff at home. So it doesn't mean that the tech part is at home and the in-person part is in the classroom. That's not the case at all. If it all has to happen in the classroom, that's great. It can all happen in the classroom, but because they all have, hopefully most districts are now one-to-one, or at least have a classroom set, you have the ability to get the students on these devices, whether they're in small groups or individually or as a large group. But yes, do this for a morning activity to free you up to do what you need to do and be able to make those connections with your students. So this is just a page where I've posted access to these videos instead of saying, okay, go to YouTube and search for Khan Academy and so you've got your students doing 10 clicks. Well, within those 10 clicks, they're going to get distracted, right? But if you just say log into Canvas, go to today's module and watch the videos, you're done, right? And if somebody says, wait, what are we doing? Go into Canvas, so it's a lot less administrative time on your part because it's all in, whether it's Canvas or Google Classroom or even your HyperDoc in Google Drive. Yeah, absolutely. So that's another just simple example of posting videos. This is the one where I've paired questions with the video. Now, again, because we're a Canvas studio, I have Studio as a video editing software. And I'm actually going to come into this quiz that I created. And this is just one I did for some of my teacher training, just to show you what it's like. But you can do this with a video that you've created working through a problem, or a Khan Academy video, or a video that's on YouTube that you vetted that you want to add questions to and guide their learning and their interaction with it. So if I come in here and I watch this as the quiz.
Hi, I'm Arthur Elliott.
He's teaching us how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you're like, how can it take 2.5 minutes to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? But along the way, I've added these questions here. And so if the students are coming in here, and I'll jump over, you'll notice that the question will pop up.
With unsalted peanut. I'll be using the chunky today because that's what I.
And so they cannot move forward in this video until they answer this question. And wait a minute, I was distracted. I was daydreaming. So let me rewatch that before I answer.
Hi, I'm Arthur Elliott.
Right?
Welcome
so it still allows them the ability. And this is the same with EduPuzzle, PlayPosit, Screencastify, all of those video tools out there that are, and YouTube has it too, where it's, I think in YouTube it's called annotations, but it allows you to post these questions on here. So that was a,
I'll be using the chunky today because that's what I.
Right? So what are the different types of nut butters? Well, he had smooth and chunky. And so now I can continue.
I prefer. You can use any jelly you prefer. Video. But if it's not grape or
so the nice thing is,
I recommend you start
depending on what
grape
you're
using,
strawberry. You can use this as a grade if you need to. You can just use it as a guide, but like most of the tools will give you insights. So these insights are, how much are they watching? How many people rewatched it? And you can actually go in, and if I take a look at a student, these two students watched 100% of it. Test student is me, I've only watched 1/3 of it, but it gives you that data that you need to see if they're actually participating the way that you would like them to. So that's the nice thing about those different tools. But again, if you don't have access to those tools, then developing a concept map or a guided question sheet, or, you're going to turn in your sketch notes, and so that, you know that they are engaging with that video. So the flipped classroom, that basic model is you have flipped instruction where they're getting that instruction through video somehow, and then practice and application where they have access to you as the content expert to help them with their questions and guided activities and those kinds of things. And so that's that flipped classroom model. Another model, and again, I'm taking most of these from Dr. Catlin Tucker because I think she really explains them really well, but there's a lot of resources out there and different ways that they're referred to. So whole group or station rotation. And basically what this means is you have a teacher-led learning activity as your whole group, or your first station. And so the difference would be that whole group would be your direct instruction. So maybe that is something where you have them all with you at the same time and you're reviewing something with the class as a whole, or you have that first station as the teacher-led station where you're giving them that teaching, but because you are saying the same thing to all the students, you put it into a video format or a video station. So that's really the basic difference between this whole group versus a station rotation session, is just that teacher-led activity is either as a whole group or as one of your stations in small groups. And that station rotation can be a flipped lesson where you are giving them the content as a video, or you could even take it to where that teacher-led station is office hours. And so when they come to your station, whether it's as an individual, as they're rotating through the room, or as a small group, that you have that time in that station to interact with that group of students or that individual student in an office hour type situation where you're answering their questions and you're looking at their work and you're providing them with that personalized feedback and developing those connections and that interaction, that relationship. So however you set that up is up to you, but then you're going to combine that with an online station. And typically that online station is independent, where they are diving in deeper to something that they choose, whether they choose to watch another video or they choose to read another blog or they choose to read an article. But it's something that's online, and why not use all those resources that we now have at our fingertips that we didn't years and years ago, where we were stuck to whatever was in the textbook or the book that we could find in the library, right? So now we have access to those online tools, those online resources, those online blogs. But again, vet them first so that you know that what they're learning, or give them the skills. If you're teaching secondary, give them the skills. If you want them to actually do that research, give them just the skills to determine whether it is a valid site or whether it has false information, right? So there's that whole media literacy concept in this as well. And then the offline station is really offline, where they are reflecting or they're collaborating or they're in a group, small group, where they are manipulating things that you have in the classroom to just demonstrate their learning. But it's that communication, that collaboration part of the 4 C's, where they are doing that offline, and they're going to rotate through that. So it's going to look chaotic. And for as a music teacher, it was fine for me because I had noise in my room all the time. But when I started teaching computers, I wanted it quiet in my room. And so, but that's not necessarily good, because if they are engaged in their learning and their conversation is academic and it's collaborative, then that noise, as long as it's, active noise that's on task, is something that that you do want to see, and that we need to train our administrators that they want to see too, because then that means there's learning happening. But being able to control that as well. So that's the whole group and station rotation. And then, like, for example, if you're planning this, let me see if this works. This is a template that is in Catlin Tucker's blog, where she gives you templates to actually help you think through what you want your students to do. So there's the activity description, and then the teacher focus, what you're going to be doing. So on the offline, what's the hook activity? Small group discussion, anticipatory set. The online activity, read an online article, watch a video, listen to a podcast, conduct online research. And here's the beauty of that one, that online learning activity, since it is independent, they're either working independently or maybe in very small groups, 2 to 3 kids. They can choose out of that during this online learning activity which 1 or 2 of those they want to do. They don't all have to read the same article. They don't all have to watch the same video. You can give them choice so that they can choose, and some honestly will choose to do all of them, right? But there are going to be some that's just going to choose to do one of them, because that's really all that they have at this point in time, the cognitive ability to work through in the time frame of the classroom. But you're giving them that choice of which one they're going to work through. And then the teacher-led offline learning, that can be your direct instruction, I do, we do, you do, where you facilitate a discussion as the whole group. Is it the Socrative method, those kinds of activities that you do in the classroom. Would you rather is great. So yes, we're going to give them choice, but we're going to limit their choice, because if you give them too many choices, then it's deer in headlights, right? So would you rather practice and review, or would you rather problem solve? Would you rather apply and research? What would you rather do for this follow-up activity? And then an exit ticket, which is meant to give you, the teacher, the data that you need to know what was effective, what can I, what do I need to reteach, what do I need to focus on, and what, those kinds of things, so that you can plan accordingly. So all of this is in the slide deck. It's also in my resources at the end. And then this graphic right here just shows you how I adapted that to a Canvas module. So if you're in Canvas, you can do a page where you post access to your slide deck or to your direct instruction video or whatever it is. And then you have a page that gives them the instructions on what they should be doing in their independent online learning activity, and maybe link out to your resources, and then a discussion where they're going to collaborate. So it's just the same thing in a different visual format, because it's in Canvas as a module rather than a hyperdoc or a Google slide deck, which has links out. So however you organize it, because that's what you have access to as the tools, and that your district is supporting. And the nice thing about these whole group and station rotation modules, that it does allow you to collect data. You can share that data with your departments or your PLCs. It helps you to develop instruction and the next steps and intervention. What do you need to do to reteach to make sure these concepts are being learned? And it helps with your climate and your culture. So they really are powerful. And then building off of that, we have our playlist and our choice board. So these are also interchangeable. The difference is the playlist is basically, these are the things that I want you to do. But just like a Spotify playlist or a YouTube playlist, you can do them out of order if you want them to, or you say that you want them done in order. But the nice thing is they're working through them at their own pace. So they're rewatching, relearning the ones that they need to. They're going through the ones that they understand quickly, but they are making that choice on how they interact with that content, whether they do them in your order or their own order. And you can see here, this is a playlist model in Canvas, using the cute emojis as part of the title name. They know that whether they're going to, watch a video, dig in and research on websites, again, whether they're finding those websites and telling you why they are credible, or you're vetting those websites and giving them links and giving them choice. A concept map, formative assessment, maybe, if part of your playlist model is that teacher check-in, that when they get to that, or if they get to a point where they are lost and they need help, then they go to they choose that teacher check-in model. And so, whether they put a sticky note that says, I'm ready for a teacher check-in, and put it on the whiteboard so that you can call them in when you have time to do that, because you're working with different students. However you gauge that, they sign in, or they sit in a certain desk, or they put sticky notes on however, so that they can get that teacher check-in. Here's a template that's also on her blog, where it gives you, this is more of a choice board, where you have these 12 different things, and one is compose a piece of writing, one is record a podcast. They also have to write that podcast before they record it, right? Create an illustration, like an infographic or a poster. Combine drawings and text. So maybe they're creating a digital storyboard or a digital story, and then recording it. So they have all of these different ways that they can engage with the content and show you that they understand the concepts. Here's a project choice board. So all of these are students self-pacing through the playlist or the list of activities, and it mixes the media, the modalities, and it's mixing online with offline. And playlists, you do all of them in order or out of order. Choice boards, you choose. Out of these 12, you need to choose 5, right? Or out of these 12, you need to choose 3. And that way, and you might have must do, can do, or must do, may do. So you've got, out of your choice board, you have ones that you have to do, but then these other ones you can choose to do. So here is a project choice board. This is that one that was in there, but again, there are links in here so you can kind of see what she's talking about on that template. But I also have, here's one. This is a choice board from Casey Bell, who is Shake Up Learning. She's Google, but this is a tic-tac-toe choice menu for studying a novel. And the way she does it is you have to choose number 5. You have to choose the middle square, but then you can go diagonal to choose 3 in a row, or just as long as you have 3 in a row. So they're doing 3 things, and everybody must do 5, but they may do 2 others, and it's their choice. So putting something like this together on a Google Doc or a Google slide, embedding it in Canvas or pulling it into Google Classroom, but it's giving them choice, so that they are choosing their learning and engaging with something. You know, like I said, I can't draw to save my life, but I could probably put together a pretty cool playlist, or I could create an interview video, a fictional interview video, but I'm not going to create a comic strip, right? Or a book jacket, unless I can do it on the computer. That's just me. But somebody else might be able to do that beautifully, whether it's on the computer or by hand. But they're not great at writing a diary, so they would, so it's giving them choice to do what they want to do. And the key with all of these is to implement a teacher check-in, whether it's a station, or if you're doing these choice board ones, maybe you have 2 squares that they have to choose, and one of them is the teacher check-in, or you're just walking around and engaging with your students. Everybody thinks that if you do it this way, then the teacher's just going to sit at the front of the room and not pay attention. That's not it at all. We all know that, right? This is your opportunity to go and make those personal connections, get to know those students that you might not have otherwise, because they are the ones that are not talking and not providing, volunteer answers. You always get the students with their hand in the air all the time who want to volunteer for everything. And so it allows you that opportunity to get to know all of your students, not just the ones that are, for lack of a better word, in your face, right? And it's surprising at how many students that are quiet, are not where we thought they were. Just by making that personal connection and checking in with them, you can figure out, where they are in their learning. So all of these stations, choice boards, flipped classroom, all of them, now I've lost where I'm at, here we are. They allow the students to decide how they engage with the information, how they process, practice, and apply what they're learning, and how they want to demonstrate their learning and reflect on their experience. Those are the key elements that you want to design when you're designing your blended learning models. Before we do this, I just want to show you real quick. Let's come in here. So again, this is Canvas, and I have an example for using Canvas in person. So, I can embed a Padlet so that they don't even have to leave Canvas in order to participate in this activity. And the nice thing about this is this Padlet was one I did in a training where I wanted them to post questions as the training went that I didn't get to answer live. And then I came back later and answered the questions in this Padlet. And not only did it answer their question, everybody else in the class had access to those answers. And it's in Canvas or Google Classroom or wherever it is, so that they can always come back and access those answers later. And so this could be one of your, exit tickets or something like that, but having it available so that they can come back and get to it later makes it that much more powerful. So again, this is a module on using Canvas for differentiation, but you can see that this, this is more of a instructional because it was for teachers. But if I come down here to, let's come into this blended learning models. This is a playlist model. So the students could come in here and they, from the modules view, they can see that they've got these different. And if I want to do, and teacher check-in is one of them, if I want to start out with research and explore, I can. And then I just come back to modules to get to the next one. But this would be a playlist model. This would be a whole group rotation where, the first model is teacher led. And even though I might be leading direct instruction, I'm going to put an overview or a summary or for students who are absent to be able to come in and know what they missed and have access to the resources that I shared when they weren't here. Then they go in and do an offline learning activity, and then maybe they collaborate offline in small groups and those kinds of things. So it's really easy to set these up in your learning management system, but you can also do this like a hyperdoc. So here's Amanda Sandoval. If you don't follow her on Twitter, do. She's amazing. She did this for her station rotation in day one. So she had a Google Doc set up, and then she hung things from her classroom ceiling to indicate where station 1 is, where station 2 is, and where station 3 is. The nice thing is stations don't have to be dependent on location. Stations can be dependent on the activity. If it's online, they don't have to be in their desk. They can go up to, if you're doing like I did the one with a point of view where they were learning point of view with cameras, that one station, they were outside taking pictures of different points of view, but different angles. So don't think about a station having to be a location, but in this case it was. So in station 1, they were going to look through American history preview books, picture books, to understand what they were going to be learning. This is 11th grade US history, right? But she was giving them examples of picture books so that they, quickly in this introductory station can read about what they were going to learn deeper during the year. And then station 2, they were to go through her class syllabus and her setup, which was online, independent reading online. And, and instead of doing this is one of those where if you're going to teach it to everybody, make a video out of it, but make sure they know how to log into their learning management system. They know how to set up their notification settings and receive email reminders or text reminders or however you're communicating. They've read through the syllabus. They understand, they can pose questions, those kinds of things. But instead of making all of your students sit through your lecture of what the class is going to be, have them interact with your syllabus. And I saw one post on Twitter yesterday, it was cupcakes and the finished cupcake. So she was describing her rubric. The finished cupcake was a 5. If it wasn't frosted yet, it was a 4. If it hadn't been cooked yet, it was a 3. So it was great because it really showed the students what it meant on the rubric. And then station 3 was getting to know you. And this is where they were going to go around with hard copies of this or that and find other students in the class, introduce themselves and find out if they liked TV or movies. Do they like cats or dogs? And engage in the learning that way.
Dana, we have 4 minutes left.
Okay, perfect. So, so you have access to this, and this has a lot of examples in here of how you can use blended learning. But what I would like you to do is experience some blended learning, and we're going to do what's called a thin slide. So here's the bit.ly or the QR code, and nope, that's not what I wanted to do, where you are going to go in there and pick a slide, any slide that doesn't have somebody's bobbing head on it, and you are going to complete this thin slide. I think that's the link. No, that's not the link. So let me open it up from here. This is the link. So I'm going to post this link in there. So basically what a thin slide is you're going to take one picture, you're going to find one picture and one word and describe what is one takeaway from today's presentation that you have. Save this link, and that way you can come back and look at each other's. You see how this one has a bobbing head on it, so that slide is claimed. So find a slide in here. There's like 40 of them. So scroll down, find a slide, and in the next 3 minutes, what's one takeaway from today's presentation that you have? And the nice thing is then you can take a look at this later and see what other people's takeaways were and compare and learn from each other. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes now to do this, which is actually how much time a thin slide I think is supposed to take. If you're not familiar with Google, you can go to Insert, Image, and you can search the web for images. And when you find an image that you want, and I'm going to use one that's used a lot, I'm going to do iceberg. You would just click on the image that you want, and then down at the bottom, click on Insert. Make sure you're on the slide that you want to be your slide, and then find one word by adding a text box, and let us know what your one word is. And with that, I'll let you work on that, and I will pull up my final slide. And it has a link to the Padlet resources that I'm sharing, where I have books that I've been reading, websites I've been using, blogs, some downloads that I've shared and templates, videos, session slide deck for today, and wakelets that I've put together for my various trainings. So a lot of everything that I've talked about, and then who I follow on Twitter. And I follow a lot of people on Twitter, but these are, some of my main influencers. So that's on there as well. And that's it. So I look forward to what you put on the thin slide, and I will stick around and answer any questions if you have them. And that would be it. Thank you very much for coming. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Dana, for all the information. And we will see you in session 4.
Thank you.